Vicky, shall we start first? Let me call Jin Chen.
He just made it. All right.
Oh, okay. Everyone's in. Okay.
All right. Okay. Merry Christmas, everybody. I was so touched when I see you guys log into the classroom. I was like, I may have no one today. It's it's a Christmas Eve, right? Thank you for spending your Christmas Eve with me. All right. I wish you all well and happy holidays. Okay, first thing first. Maggie, are you going to record? Or should I?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. Merry Christmas to you. Okay, so first thing first, homework. All right, I saw the feedback. We have student got all right, and some of you just missed 1 or 2 questions. Good job, guys. All right, so let's take a look. The first attempt for AP style multiple choice question, we did good. Yes. Alrighty. So as we mentioned, AP style MCQ is the coming set, right? So question 1, 2, 3 is based on this, what we call non-text source. So non-text could be like this one, painting, or sometimes map, photo, table, diagram, right? So what we do is when we deal with non-text source, we treat it like a text, right? So for photo, we focus on the center, right? So it's right here. Because whatever artist put in the center right here, the artist try to emphasize the idea. And so it's just like the topic sentence when we are writing for paragraphs, right? Okay, so in the center, what we see is this big equipment, and we know this one is what? Trebuchet, right? And we do we have footnotes? No, we don't. But we know trebuchet like this were used to launch right here. So trebuchet like this were used to launch the earliest type of explosive bomb. Okay, so that gives us some idea. This is a warship, right? Because it's equipped with gunpowder, right? And then as you can see right here, so after we decipher the center, the topic sentence, right? So it is focused on depicting the ability to equipped weapon on the boat, right? And then on the left, you see the person here is carrying weapon, right? And this one right here is navigating the boat, right? So it's a warship, right? That's good enough for us. And then we check the time period is 1040 to 1044. That would associate with Chinese Song Dynasty, right? And Song Dynasty worship. Okay, so now, okay, the big idea right here would be what? Chinese invention of gunpowder, right? And equipped on the worship, okay, and Song Dynasty trade. Okay, what else we know? Song Dynasty, big bureaucracy, focus on scholar, but you know, kind of like, you know, undermine the power of the military on purpose. Okay, that's what we know so far. Now let's take a look at question 2. We missed question 2. Everybody got question 1 correct. Good job. Question 2 is asking us which element of the image above would have the greatest impact. All right, so the question asks us to refer to the image. So we're gonna refer back to the image, right? So this kind of concept or phenomena have the greatest impact on Afro-Eurasia due to the increased cross-cultural interactions in this time period. Okay, so you're gonna relate it to this, you know, gunpowder worship concept because we are asked to go back to the image, right? So in this case, option A, the trebuchet on top of the ship possible is the correct description of the image. So keep it. B, the oars used to steer the ship, that would be referring to this part, right? So this is, you know, still correct according to the image, right? But we know the historical context, right? It's all about gunpowder, because in period 1, we talk about how this state building, right? How they managed to rise up and establish their empire. So I don't think with this ores can help these states to establish their empire, right? It's all about gunpowder. Question B, even though the description match the image, but it does not match the historical context and the big idea, right? So based on this ores, you can cross out B, all right? And C, the design of the ship. Okay, the design maybe, okay, how they equip their gunpowder, but still, option C focus on design. But we know the big idea is what? How these states managed to establish their empire, right? So the design may not be as essential as the gunpowder. So you can have a question mark right here for now. So keep C, same like option A, question mark. All right, and then D, the explosive carry on the ship. Okay, explosive carry on the ship. So in this case, we have option A, C, and D, right? We cross out B for sure, because ores do not really help the states to build up the empire, right? Now, ask ourselves, the most influential impact or culture cross-culture interactions related to Asian China invention to the rest of the world for Eurasia, that would be gunpowder, right? Or on top of that, paper printing for later era, right? So gunpowder, paper printing, in this case, amongst A, C, D, we compare with, no, amongst the keyword. So note to yourself, when we say keyword, we meant nouns and adjective, nouns and adjective. Why? Because nouns and adjectives, they provide the most solid concept. It gives us a concrete idea. So, but amongst trebuchet, design, explosive, which one would be the most influential culture, cross-cultural interaction? That would be gunpowder, right? So which one is gunpowder? D, explosive. And that's how Mongol managed to conquer most of the Asia, right? That's later on how Europeans adopt gunpowder and colonize the America, right? And took down Aztec and Inca. That makes sense? That's question 2. We go with D. So our train of thought would be first focus on the center and see what we see, and then associate with the knowledge we have in related to this topic, this time period. Then we know, okay, it's all about how state built their empire, right? Through gunpowder. In that case, you started to examine the keywords, right? Focus on nouns and adjectives. And then if you only can cross out one option, don't panic yet. Keep whatever options you have doubts. And in the end, you started to compare the keywords and choose the one that match the theme, the big idea in regarding to this time period. And that makes sense? Oh, adverb is not important. No, adverb is only related to the extent, right? So nouns and adjective is where we get the solid idea. All right. Okay, so that's question 2. And then move on to question 3. Which of the following Chinese culture? Okay, so now it's focused on Chinese culture traditions right here, had the largest impact on neighboring regions in East Asia. So now it's narrowed down to East Asia, and it's influenced by Chinese culture, right? And China's neighboring state in East Asia, that's referring to Korea and Japan, right? So which part? That should be Confucianism, right? Confucianism, because Confucianism originated from China. You can go all the way back to what? To Confucius, that would be what? The Spring Autumn era, right? And then Han Dynasty kind of adopted this Confucianism and established the direction, right? The path for the later dynasty to follow. So our society today still is under a strong influence of Confucianism, right? And Confucianism focused on this piety, especially filial piety, right? So we are supposed to respect our elderly and not to challenge them, right? And on top of that, we not just respect, we sort of like obey, right? We don't challenge our superior. That's the core spirit of Confucianism. And this Confucianism became a convenient tool, or you can even say weapon, for governments to control over the society, right? Because if you believe in Confucianism, you would not challenge your superior, right? So kids versus parents, you obey, right? Wives versus husbands, you obey. That means what? Subjects versus the government. You won't even try to challenge the government, right? So that will enable the government to better regulate the society. So the spirit of Confucianism is to appeal to the most 5 important relationship within the society, right? And then if everybody play the social role according to what they're supposed to, right? And there will be a social harmony. That's the spirit of Confucianism. And this belief system later on will be introduced to Japan and Korea. So if you visit Japan and Korea, you will see this, resembling of Chinese society system there, right? So that's number 3. And canals, yeah, that started from Sui dynasty, right? But it's not like, the most important impact of in Japan or in Korea, right? And then paper money later, yes, starting from late Song and then Yuan and then Ming, especially in Ming Dynasty, right? When Ming Dynasties promote the trade, right? And then we have paper money, but it's not yet. Now we are in Song dynasty, right? And then food biting, yes, it's a tradition in Song dynasty, but it's not adopted by Japan or Korea, all right? So that's question 3, right? Done with this set. Now let's move on to set 2, question 4 to 6. This sources right here comes with a pair, right? So we have source 1, source 2 right here. So first of all, it's a text source for sure. And when we have text source, we focus on, again, the time period. Once we locate the time period, we can refer to the knowledge we know about the big idea, right? So it's like, pre-period 1, period 1, and the source, first one is from Persian Muslim. This one is from Spanish Christian. Okay, so we have Persian Muslim versus Spanish Christian. Let's see what they have to say. The Persian Muslim says the ancients, so that refers to Greek physicians, right, have claimed that snake flesh and theriac. So here we have a footnote. Let's see what that is. Okay, so theriac and electaries were kinds of medicine. Okay, that's all we need to know. So ancient Greek physicians, they claim that snake flesh and medicine made from it can heal the patient of leprosy. What is leprosy? Let's see. Leprosy is an infectious disease. Oh, okay. So medicine heal disease. That's all we need to know. But I do not have such experience, even though its reputation is famous. Okay, so this is it. Well, a question posed by this Persian Muslim, like, in related to this ancient Greeks, sort of like an invention of medicine to treat patients, right? So this quote kind of reminds us of what of Muslims, and this time period, what dynasty or what caliphate is that? That would be Abbasid, right? So Abbasid Caliphate started from 700-ish, right? Ongoing until they're conquered by Mongol, right? So Abbasid Caliphate, and talking about medicine, that remind us of a very important concept that enable Abbasid Caliphate to thrive, would be the establishment of House of Wisdom, right? House of Wisdom is an institution financially supported by the government to encourage innovation, research, and invention, including medicine. Okay, so here we see this critical thinking concept incorporated in Muslim world, right? So they do not just take whatever they're being taught. They actually question, is that true? So this Muslim, probably a scholar or even a physician, try to question this ancient Greek's practice. Okay, now let's move on to the next source. The next source is pretty brief, just one statement. It's talking about vipers. Again, it's a snake, right? Excuse me, were to be utilized as Avicenna. Okay, Avicenna, what is that? Avicenna Ibn was a Persian scholar. Once again, Persian scholar. In this time period, they were already Islamized, right? Okay, so this Persian scholar taught, okay, he's teaching in food, drink, electrolytes. Okay, electrolytes, we have that, it's medicine, right? Oh, okay, so it's snake vipers, right? Being used in food, drink, medicine, ointments, and grain theories. Okay, so again, it's related to how Persian scholars use snakes to create food, drink, medicine, right? So to treat a disease, right? So these two sources focus on medicine, right? Physicians. And the first source is written by a Persian Muslim questioning the ancient Greeks, saying. And then the second source is written by a Spanish Christian, just to make a statement saying that Muslims, they use snake as food, drink, and medicine. Okay, so that's all we need to know. Now let's take a look at question 4. Question 4 is asking that the passages, so that means what? We're gonna base on the source to answer to this question, right? So the passages above most clearly illustrates which are the following. So the passage right here, the big idea we have based on the source is what? Medicine made from snake, right? And source 1 say, is that really effective? And source 2 is like, well, Muslims, they do that. Okay, so let's examine the options. A, it goes, the continued impact of religion. So this keyword, none, right? And belief systems on society. So based on these two keywords, let's examine that. Do these two keywords echo the main idea we locate from the sources? Not really. The main idea is what? Snake, right? So we have snake. I'm using my mouse to write, all right? I normally do not write like that. And then medicine, right? Basically, it's a snake made into medicine. So it's not religion. It's not religion. It's not belief system. So option A, when we compare the keywords to the keywords we located from the source, they do not match, right? So based on this, you can cross out A, right? So note to yourself, when you compare keywords from the option versus the source, as long as they don't match, you can cross it out. All right, keyword wrong, then you can cross this option wrong, out, all right? And then B, the spread of Chinese. Do we have any information related to Chinese culture in this case? Not at all. So key term does not match the big idea in the source, so you can cross it out, right? And then C, the consequences of political decentralization in Europe. Do we have any politics mentioned in this source? No, it's all about snake made into medicine, right? So the key term is wrong. Cross it out. That only give us the last option, that is choice D, the effects of intellectual innovation in Dar Islam. Okay, so option D, we have 2 keywords, okay, or key phrases, right? So option D, first is the effect of intellectual innovation. So intellectual innovation, can that be supported by this scholars you're using snake to make into medicine? Yes, we can, right? Because this is intellectual innovation. Because intellectual innovation is an umbrella term. It's more general. I don't know if you're familiar with this term called hypernym. Does anybody know the term hypernym? Hypernym. I'm just gonna type it. All right. So the term called hypernym versus hyponym. Anybody? Hyper versus hypo. Do we know what is hypernym? What is hyponym? You probably talk about that in your English class. Anyone? Anyone? Hypernym versus hyponym? No? Okay. Hypernym in this case, this is a Latin root and suffix. So first of all, we chop off these two words and you'll locate this one. This is the root of this word. All right. So NYM in Latin is the same thing like English name. All right. So English adopt num and then change it to name. So when you say num, it's name. Like Alex is your name, right? But you cannot deny that Alex is also a word, right? So when you see num in the future, it's associated with word. All right. For example, synonym. Synonym is what? Same, right? That means what? Words that have the same meaning. Synonym. All right. And then antonym. Right? So words that have the opposite meaning, right? So hypernym, words that, okay, now we're gonna ask ourselves, what is hyper? Hyper indicates up. All right. So words that have the upper level meaning, all right? And then hypo is what? Below. All right, hypo means below. So words that possess the meaning in the below level. What does that mean? Okay, so give an example. If you look at this word tool, it's a typical example to illustrate the concept of a hypernym. If you look it up in the dictionary, the definition for tool is, it goes something like that. A tool is a device that can assist someone to achieve a goal, right? So that's the definition of tool. So this definition covers pretty wide range, right? So underneath this term called tool, the next generation varies. Let's cite 2 generations to make it easier. So as long as it's a device that can help us to achieve the goal, it's a tool, right? So how about vehicle? Can we say a vehicle is a tool? Let's examine the definition, right? Is vehicle a device? Oh yeah, it's a device, right? Can a vehicle help us to achieve the goal? I think so. Transport us from point A to point B, right? So in this case, you can say a vehicle, it's a tool. Agree? So based on that, you can compare the relationship between tool and vehicle. In this case, you can say tool is the hypernym of vehicle, and vehicle is the hyponym of tool. All right. And can we think of any other tool in this generation? Sure. We just, it's mealtime, right? Either you just had breakfast or had your supper. So in order for you to eat, you need what? Tableware, right? So do you believe that tableware fit into tool family? I think so. First of all, it's a device, right? It can help us to achieve a goal, dining, eating, check. So in this 2 generation, relatively tool is the hypernym for both vehicle and tableware. But it's relatively, right? Because even hyponym in this case can have its own hyponym, right? So vehicle can also be pretty wide range, right? So underneath that, what is a vehicle? A device that can transport us, right? So I know, okay, in that case, this family includes up in the air, we have aircraft, right? Aircraft. And then on the ground, we have automobile, right? And you can keep going on and on and on. So aircraft, underneath that, you can have what? Hot air balloon. right? You can have chopper, you can have airplane, right? As long as this device can fly and carry passengers, it's an aircraft, right? So based on the definition, a Superman can be an aircraft, right? All right, or what else? You can think about a space shuttle, right? So they're all aircrafts. So you see the relationship here, right? From generation to generation to generation to generation, right? So it kind of reminds us of a family tree, right? So vocabulary words have their own family tree, all right? And when you examine them, the seniority, when you see the generation tend to be more senior, that they tend to be hypernym, right? And the younger generation, they tend to be associated with hyponym, right? So the reason I'm talking about this is give you an idea how to do POE in multiple choice questions, right? So as soon as we relate the, we pinpoint the key concept from the source, again, nouns and adjectives, right? Then when you use that keywords to compare with the options, the keywords of the options, then you compare them in what way? You try to locate hypernym. Okay, so let me give you a question, all right? Alex, do you believe this statement is correct? A vehicle is a tool. Is that a correct logical statement, Alex? A vehicle is a
Yeah,
tool. Why?
because you can like use the vehicle to do something.
So I can say a vehicle is a tool. Nobody would challenge me, right?
Yeah, I guess.
Okay, how about if I say a vehicle is an automobile?
Yeah,
Is that logically correct?
yeah,
Are you sure? A vehicle is an automobile? Is that logically correct?
no,
Why not?
because like an automobile is like a type of vehicle.
There you go, a type, right? So if I claim that a vehicle is an automobile, it can challenge me, right? What about airplane, right? What about boat? Are they vehicle too? Oh yeah. So my statement was vehicle is an automobile, right? So I'm being too extreme because I narrowed down the option for vehicle. Vehicle can only be automobile. Logically, it does not stand. You see the logic right here, right? So if we claim that the hypernym is the hyponym, no, there's a logical flaw, right? So like this one, the sources, it's focused on snake medicine, right? Snake medicine. And you see the options in 4D. You see how College Board paraphrase this snake medicine into intellectual innovation. So the source, keywords of the source is the hyponym of the option D, intellectual innovation. So if we paraphrase the keywords into hypernym, we're safer because medicine, it's within this family called intellectual innovation. Agree? The innovation of medicine, it's an innovation in intellectual world, right? Because intellectual includes infrastructure, space, right? Technology, literature, right? That's also intellectual, right? Economics, right? Also medicine, right? All this fit into intellectual family. Does that make sense? So there is a pattern. Okay, there's a pattern, or you can say there is a trend, how College Board designed the correct answer. They will use the keyword from the source, right, and make it into the hypernym in the option, right? So if you see I know that the answer should related to medicine, right? And then you ask yourself, the innovation in medicine, can I paraphrase into the innovation in intellectual? Yes, because medicine fit into intellectual. Does that make sense? So you compare intellectual versus what? Religion, belief. Well, this one, there's no comparison because the keyword is wrong right away. right? So 4D, my point is 4D, as soon as I see intellectual innovation, I say, very likely. Why? Because intellectual innovation is the hypernym of an advancement in medicine. Does that make sense? I hope I'm making sense to you guys. All right. And the next keyword is Dar Islam. Dar Islam is what? Wherever you go, you see is what? Islam ruled state. That is part of the Dar Islam, right? So Muslim, Persia fitting to Dar Islam? Yes, right? How about Spain? Yes. Spain was Islamized back to Umayyad Caliphate, right? So when time goes to Abbasid, of course, Spain was still a Islamic state. So that fitting to Dar Islam. So number 4D, check. All right, I'll give you a couple seconds to digest what I just said, the relationship between hyper and hyponym. So when you do POE, process of elimination, you compare the keywords. Once again, keywords, nouns and adjectives, all right? And the keywords in the option tend to be a hypernym in related to the keywords in the source. This POE trick, okay, can be applied to any kind of exam in multiple choice. You can use that in your SAT reading. You can use that in your TOEFL reading and listening. You can use that in any kind of AP multiple choice question. So compare the keyword, all right? So as soon as you see the keyword is being paraphrased into hyponym, cross it out because you cannot prove it. If the author used vehicle and the option use automobile, you can cross it out. Because how do you know the author meant automobile? The author mentioned vehicle. You're not the author. How do you know it's automobile? You cannot know for sure. Perhaps the author meant boat, right? So you have no evidence to support this option saying that the author refers to automobile. All right. Okay, so that's question 4. And then question 5, the passages above could, above right here, could best be used as evidence of which are the following historical development. Okay, so development, once again, change, right? Cause effect. So the passage can be an evidence that lead to something later on. So this passage is the cause, right? And result in something happen later, right? So cause effect. So this evidence is what? The innovation in pretty much the whole 9 yards within Dar Islam, and in particular, House of Wisdom, right? And these will have some kind of consequences later. Okay, so let's see what kind of consequences we have. A, the influence of Islamic belief and practice in South Asia. Okay, so question 5, option A, the influence of Islamic beliefs and practice. Maybe because both sources, they are related to Islam, right? One is Persian Muslim, the other one is a Spanish Christian. Maybe he hasn't converted yet, but we do know Spain is Islamized by this time, right? So let's keep it for now. If you have doubts, keep it. B, the creation of the House of Wisdom in Abbasid Baghdad. All right. So the creation of a House of Wisdom, that's also true, right? In Abbasid Baghdad. Okay. So creation of the House of Wisdom. All right. But can this be used as an evidence? Question mark. Let's say for now, okay, because this kind of is supported by passage 1, but not necessarily passage 2, right? So let's see, option C, scholarly and culturally transfer in Muslim and Christian Spain. Like this one. Why? Scholarly and cultural transfers. Okay, do we have a transfer? Yeah, one is from Greek to Islam, the other is from Islam to Spain. So C, the first part of this statement, check, is supported by the source, right? And do we have Muslim and Christian Spain? Yeah, because the author of the first passage is a Persian Muslim, right? And the second passage is a Spanish Christian. So for option C, all the keywords in the option C can be supported by the passages right here. Agree? So we do have evidence everywhere from the source to support option C. Okay, and option D goes the mango. We don't have mango anywhere in the two passages, right? So in this case, A, B, C, once again, C, we have evidence for all the keywords in option C. And for A and B, Islamic belief and practice. Okay, practice maybe, but beliefs is related to what? Belief system. Belief system either is an ideology or is religion, right? But it's not really like ideology or religion. It's focused on medicine, right? So in this case, C is much better than A, right? We don't have any like a concrete evidence to support beliefs right here. And option B, in this case, the creation of the house of wisdom. So the creation of it is what? To aim for the scholar research for like, cultural achievement, right? But we have the particular practice in this case is the medicine, right? So option C in question 5, all the keywords have evidence from the source, but A and B, all the keywords we have question mark. Is that? So since we can find evidence from the source to support option C, we have no question marks, right? So in that case, I highly recommend you to go with C. Of course, you can argue for A and B to be correct, but when you started to build up your chain of logic to prove that option A and B are correct, you're being subjective because you need to incorporate with your belief. Look, you see, okay, so here we have medicine practice, right? And this medicine practice is based on the Islamic society's belief system. The government wants to improve, okay, their society, their economy, right? So the government financially support House of Wisdom. Well, when you're doing so, you're being subjective already because you're building this chain of logic to prove that you're right. But option C, you do not need to do so because the source already say so. Make sense? So AP style multiple choice question. When the question asks us to use the source, okay, as evidence, right? You gonna focus on whatever key concept evidence you can find from the source, okay, as kind of like the reference for you to do your POE, process of elimination, right? So that's question 5, right? Stop me if you don't understand or you have doubts, right? Next, sets 7, 8, 9. Okay, we're back to this non-text source, right? So 7 to 9, if you miss it, that's understandable because we did not cover futurism yet. All right. So basically here we have a source, it's a map, right? And it's saying that agriculture at the Middle Age in Europe, right? When exactly is Middle Age? Middle Age is, well, basically is after the fall of Western Roman Empire, right? And this European society become like, chaos. And later on, they gradually establish this system called feudalism, right? And then all the way till the Renaissance, right? So Middle Age is somewhere between the fall of Western Roman Empire all the way to the initial step of Renaissance, right? And its Middle Age is also known as the Dark Age. The Dark Age refers to how superstitious the entire European society could be. Everything was explained by religion. There's no desire to adopt science to explain the world, right? So that's the Middle Age. So Middle Age time period we know, and the society is under feudalism, right? And the culture is what? Religion centered, okay, society, right? So if you look at the map, again, focus on the center, right? So the center you see, well, we have a church. Again, religion dominated society, right? And we have a manor house. So what is manor? Okay, manor is the landlord. Okay, so we have a land that is owned by this landlord, All right, and this landlord's house is right next to church. So even though this guy is the landlord, but in comparison to religion, still, yeah, you have to yield, right? So religion-centered society, right? And then it's kind of isolated to the rest of the world, right? So it's self-sufficient society, right? So this kind of lifestyle we call monorism, okay? Monorism, and it's within this feudalism society, right? So the landlord would have the land granted by his monarch, king or queen, and then he can design his own little community right here, his own society, and definitely you will see church included in this community, right? And the land will be divided into different sectors. So we have, okay, after we done deciphering the center, then we go to the second layer, right? So second layer is whatever is, behind or like, in the corner. So we will see like a north field, we have south field, then we have a woodland, then we have waste, right? And we have a farmer's village right here. Okay, so it's a pretty well designed, compact society under the rule of the landlord right here, monarch, but religion is the center of people's daily life. Okay, that's what we know for feudalism. Okay, so 7, the position and size of the church. The position is the center, right? And the size is even bigger than the monarch's house, right? Is evident of which of the following development from this time period, right? Well, so church, power, okay, it's even above the landlord. You can paraphrase in this way, right? So based on that, let's examine the options. Okay, so 7A, it says the creation of feudalism and the manorial system. Okay, the creation of feudalism is not because of the church. The church is the result, right? The church is the result from this feudalism. So what led Europeans to adopt this feudalism system? We'll talk about today, all right? But basically is what? After the fall of Roman Empire, all right, the European society witnessed this constant conflicts amongst these tribes, okay, this Germanic people, Goth people, Anglican people, right? Each of them, they try to claim their power, their authority, right? So the former citizens or subjects that left behind from Roman Empire, they need to seek for protection, right? So the European society, imagine that after the fall of Western Roman Empire, right, there's no centralized government, right? When a society have no centralized government or even a government, right, and the social order is a quite big question mark, right? So people constantly compete against each other, try to secure their power over the other, right? So for common people, especially peasants, right, they need protection. They don't have the emperor to protect them anymore. So they need protection, right? So that's the desire that lead to the establishment of feudalism. So feudalism basically is what? The social hierarchy established within European society, right? So we have the top is the monarch, normally is the king, right? And underneath the king, we have the nobles, right? And underneath the nobles, we have knights, right? And at the social button, we have the peasants and everybody else, right? So with this social hierarchy, each social class, they have their superior, that's the lord, all right? And the lord would have whoever, being so loyal to the lord, right? That would be considered as their vassal, right? So the relationship between the lord and vassal is what? The lord provide protection to the vassal, and in return, the vassal pledge their fealty, their loyalty to their lord, right? So based on this social hierarchy, everybody has their, respective protection from their lords. And that's why we have this creation of feudalism, because the desire for protection, okay, within this, chaos in European society after the fall of Western Roman Empire. Okay, so option A does not work because this is the result. This is the result of the creation of feudalism, right? And then for option B, the importance of Christianity in shaping European society. So option B, the importance of Christianity. Oh yeah, because you see how big this church is, right? So importance of Christianity in shaping European society. So why the creation of feudalism lead to this isolated society, and then the entire European society focus on religion? Well, back to this feudalism, you see the social hierarchy, right? So have a king, noble, knights, and peasants, right? So you have various kingdoms within Europe right now, instead of one centralized government, right? Like a Roman Empire. So they did not have that. So have their regional kingdom. Each kingdom have their own monarch, king or queen, right? But the entire Europe has no centralized government, right? So it's kind of, difficult to keep the whole European society united, right? So they need some kind of glue to hold Europeans together. And that glue is the church, okay? The religion practice, Catholicism, okay? Based in Roman Catholic Church right here, headquarters, right? So religion was the only force that can, unite the whole European society together. Other than that, they have their, national identity. Okay, like, I'm Frank people. Okay, I'm a French subject, right? And then I'm Germanic people. I'm the subject of German, right? So they have their per individual identity. Okay, but the Europe as a whole, the only thing everybody share in common is their religious practice. All right, so that's why the king will use this religion practice as the source of their legitimacy. It's like a divine right of king, all right? So it's God chose me to be your Lord, all right? So you're gonna pledge your loyalty to me, and in return, I'll protect you. And that's the spirit of a feudalism society, all right? So importance of Christianity in shaping European society. This one is correct, all right? And then a struggle between secular and religious authority. Do we see any struggle? We don't, right? So religion right here, right? We know secular, right? Secular is nothing to do with the religious practice, right? So like politics, economy, society, right? That sort. So the Lord and the church, we do not see any struggle in this map. So based on the struggle, you can cross out C. And then D, the break with existing Christian traditions by Protestants. Again, we do not see any break in the map. We just see, okay, so this is a map of a monarch under European feudalism system. That's all we see. So we don't see struggle, we don't see break, right? And then we do see the importance of Christianity. How? Where's the evidence? Well, the evidence is the church is even bigger than the landlord's house, and the church's location is in the center of this community, right? Number 8, the whole map above can best be used as evidence of which development once again. So it's a development change, right? So European society started from an initial step after the fall of Roman Empire. It's a chaos, right? Constant conflicts between these nations, okay, to compete, for territory. And later on, subjects, people within this big European society started to look for protection, and they create this feudalism system, right? So for number 8, let's see. Option A, Ottoman religious tolerance for Christian. Nah, okay, it's not. Because Ottoman's religious tolerance first of all, the time period is wrong, right? And Ottoman won't started to rise up until 1450-ish. So it's after, post this time period, right? And Ottoman religion, Ottoman Empire did not really provide religious freedom. Okay, so we'll get to that part later, right? So A, Ottoman religious tolerance. This tolerance is already wrong. All right, B, European dependence on Islamic and Asian technological development in agriculture. Do we see any technological development here? No, we only see how they design their community, right? So for option B, this technological development, wrong. See, Europe was largely an agricultural society, okay? Agricultural society, check, because this map shows a agricultural society, depending on free and coerced labor. Okay, so this part is that I don't see it. Yeah, we do not see it, right? But it's the development, right? So something derived from this feudalism, right? So feudalism, where did all these landlords get their labor force? Well, feudalism is what? Your lord, the king or queen, granted the noble with this land. So whatever is on this land is now yours, my noble, right? So in this case, this noble get to control the land and the people who live on it. So these peasants now, they have a new boss, the lord, okay, whoever the king or queen granted the right, to this person. And then these peasants, they have no choice but to work for their lord now. So they are coerced labor. Okay, but sometimes you will see freemen, okay, they travel to this community and they're willing to work in exchange for food or shelter, right? So European agricultural society, their major labor force would be the coerced peasants, right? So we have evidence from the map to support the first part of option C. We have our knowledge to support the second part of option C, and it's related to the source as well, because this is a farm, right? So labor kind of makes sense, especially we have the farmer's village right here, okay? And then option A is wrong because it's not Ottoman. Option B is wrong because we don't see any technological development, right? And option D is wrong. Why? European reliance on cash crop for economic development. No, we don't see cash crops. All right. It's a way to say that. How do you know it's not cash crop? It's north field is south field, right? So north field, south field. Remember earlier we said hyponym, right? So in the map, it only show us this is an agricultural society, right? And agricultural society, that's the hypernym, agricultural society. Underneath that, you can plant food crop. You can plant cash crop, right? So the source is hypernym, but the option is hyponym. I cannot say agricultural society produce cash crop. I cannot, because they produce something else. That makes sense. So it's not like, hypernym is hyponym. This logic chain does not exist. So number 8, we go with C. That makes sense. And then number 9, territories like the one pictures on the map were the result of which historical development? Okay, once again, it's an isolated, self-sufficient European society, right? So let's see. A, political decentralization following the collapse of the Roman Empire. Yes, we mentioned that earlier, right? The fall of Roman Empire lead to this social chaos in Europe, right? Constant conflicts, battles, right? To fight over territory that result in people seeking for protection, right? And then we have this feudalism society established, right? So number 9 would go with A. All right. Well, that's our first practice for MCQ. So think about it. If you have any questions, ask now for this unit 1, unit one multiple choice question. Questions? No? No? If not, we can move on to our feudalism today. Okay. So feudalism in Europe. All right. So through set 3, question 7, 8, 9, we kind of like, talk about the big idea how this feudalism was established in Europe, right? Well, so after the fall of Roman Empire, this is basically how Europe looked like, all right? So remember Roman Empire in 330 CE, Roman Empire split into 2 parts, okay? Because the empire grew too big to be controlled, right? So to prevent the empire from falling due to its size, the emperor decided to divide the empire into 2, right? And then they give it to the 2 sons, right? So in the West, it's called Western Roman Empire, but normally we just call it Roman Empire. In the East, shaped in yellow right here, is the Eastern Roman Empire, right? And historians normally refer to this Eastern Roman Empire as Byzantine Empire, right? So the term Byzantine Empire is actually created by historians for the purpose to distinguish between these 2 Roman empires, right? So starting from this point on, when we say Byzantine, is the Eastern Roman Empire. When we say Roman Empire, is the Western Roman Empire, all right? So Roman Empire, the government, okay, fell to this so-called barbarians, right? In 485, okay. So Europe became a these nation dominated territory society. So you have Kingdom of Frank, you have Saxons, right? You have Slavs, and then you have like Visigoths, right? And we have Ostrogoths, right? So different ethnic group of people, they started to claim their rights over certain territory, right? And that's how Europe looked like after the fall of Rome, right? And then people, right? So people, they had to deal with these invaders and conflicts on their own, right? Because now you have no emperor to protect you, no central government, right? And then on top of that, you see, after this warm period from 750 to 1100, because a warm period, right, that would aid the harvest, right, of agriculture and, history principle, okay? More food equals to more babies, right? And then that would lead to population increase, right? So warmer weather lead to better, this harvest in agriculture, and that will increase their population. Also, we have this Muslim invaders, right? Remember this threat from this Seljuk Turk, right? That take down Anatolia from Byzantine Empire, right? That as a result, Byzantine Empire had to call for help from the Roman Catholic Church, right? And that lead to the first Crusader, okay? And then Mongols, right? Mongols conquering the Afro-Eurasia, and also Huns and Germanic tribes, everything. So European societies are constantly being threatened by various power, right? So there's no protection from their previous Roman government, right? So Europeans, when we say Europeans, we refer to the people who remained in the society after the fall of Roman Empire, right? So these Europeans, they had to seek for protection, right? So they developed this system of fealty. So fealty is when a person declare loyalty to someone, all right? So that someone would be either nobles or kings, right? So this system is later on called feudalism, okay? So feudalism is a social hierarchy. So we have lords versus vassals, right? And so these nobles, they declare this loyalty to kings, and then knights to noble, peasants to the knights, right? So in this case, everybody is like, happy, right? So you only need to deal with your lords, right? And then as long as you show your fealty, your loyalty to your lord in return will protect you, right? So peasants, they were bound to work the land for taxes. So this is actually what we call corvée labor. In another term, would be forced labor. Forced labor. And later on, this men's labor force relying on forced labor is known as serfdom. Okay, serfdom, right? Serfdom, right? So serfdom is a system that the economic labor force rely heavily upon forced labor. That's a serfdom, right? And then, so kings and lords, they founded their armies with personal agriculture, right? So basically what we're trying to say here is the whole society looks something like this. If you look at this, a social hierarchy pyramid, right? We have different social class, right? So peasants is the labor force, right? So if you want to figure out how this feudalism society provide for themselves, right? That would be peasants, they are the major labor force. So they work on the field, okay, to produce food, right? And then do they get anything in return? Yeah, they get their the protection from the knights, all right, from the knights. So the knights will make sure all these peasants, okay, they are safe, right? And when it's, you know, harvest season, the knights will come and collect tax, right? So that's the, you know, relationship between knights and peasants. And then the knights, well then, okay, report whatever, okay, important to the nobles, right? So the nobles will have the tax collected by knights from the peasants, right? So the nobles will then keep proportion for him or herself, and then the rest will give it to the king as a tax revenue to provide the government operation cost, right? So knights and nobles, the knights pledge their loyalty to their lords, the nobles, right? And in return, the nobles will protect them, also pay them wage, right? And then between noble and king, again, the noble pledged their loyalty to king, and in return, the king granted lands to nobles. And not necessarily we can claim that the king protects the nobles. Not necessarily, right? So the relationship between the king and nobles is a little bit different when you compare between noble and knights and peasants. Okay, the king, ideally, because you are the lord to the nobles, right? So you're supposed to protect your nobles, right? But the nobles is like, nah, we don't really need your protection. Why? Because look, who has the direct access to the taxation? It's the nobles, not the king, all right? So it's the nobles send their knights to collect tax from the peasants. So normally you will see the nobles back then tend to be richer sometimes than their king, could be. Okay, so if a noble have some kind of, you know, certain personal agenda, then you will see nobles, they will kind of, you know, lie about the taxation, all right, and keep bigger proportion for themselves. So nobles, they tend to be more wealthy, okay, sometimes in comparison to their king, right? So nobles, since they're wealthy, right, and they only need to pay salaries to their knights, right, and they only need to tend to their own land, right? So their expenditure is much less than the monarch, right? So in this case, the nobles, they have more money, okay, to what to supply to sustain their standing army. So nobles tend to have their standing army, while the monarch normally don't. So the monarch, they may have army, okay, just to protect the palace, but the scale of the army the monarch had in comparisons to nobles, the nobles' army is no larger, okay, stronger. Okay, so in this case, the king, you do not really need to provide protection to your nobles because they are stronger than you, okay, in most cases. So what can the king do though to you know, provide incentive to the nobles in return to receive the nobles, you know, loyalty? Well, land, right? Because the king is the monarch of this kingdom, right? So the king has all the land. So the king can use the land as incentive, right, to exchange the loyalty from their nobles, right? And the nobles, they have their own armies, right, standing armies. And then in return, they're gonna, pledge their loyalty to the king, meaning what? If the king needs you, okay, there's a attack from foreign power, the king will summon the nobles army, okay, to fight in this war on behalf of the king. All right. So that's the relationship between the king and nobles, right? So in this case, underneath this European feudal system, the king and the nobles not necessarily is like a lord and vassal. Well, by definition, yes, but in reality, they are more like interdependent on each other. All right. So keep that in mind. King and nobles under feudalism, they are more like interdependent on each other. Nobles depend on the kings, okay, authorizing their possession of the land, so they can be the lord of whatever land they own, right? And then the king in return will have the nobles support with their army when necessary, right? So here we have these two terms, vassals versus lords, right? So vassals is the tenant, right? People below, and the lords is the people above, right? So that multiple choice question right here, right? This map, right? It's a typical European society under feudalism in this case, because we have the monarch, right? They have this self-sufficient lifestyle, right? So that's feudalism. Okay, so feudalism. So back to this feudalism, right? So now we know what basically what a feudalism society looked like, right? And why did it happen? Well, that's because the former Roman Empire is now gone. So people, they have no protection from their previous government. So they're gonna find a new protection, right? And they somehow developed this feudalism system, right? And it's not a centralized government, because it's just kingdom, regional government. So entire Europe, there is no empire anymore. There's no centralized government, right? Okay, and in exchange for labor or coin, right? So you see peasants, and others, they were subject to the legal and economic power of lord of the monarch. Okay, so monarch is a state, right? So landlord, right? So this kind of society, we give them another term called manorialism, right? So self-sufficient community within this feudalism society, right? Okay, so with that in mind, let's talk about this feudal problems. So we mentioned that during medieval time period, medieval Europe, also known as the Dark Age, right? The entire European society was pretty much considered as irrelevant to the rest of the world, right? Because they live under this isolated, self-sufficient lifestyle, right? And then whenever the lord received land from the monarch, right, and they started to build their own manor, right, and they have their own compact society, right, and with the coerced labor, work hardest to produce food, right, and where the lords enjoy all this possession, right, and then this kind of society represent a big problem for Europe. That is, the whole society is lack of mobility. Pretty much everybody is bound to the land they were born onto, right? So a baby born into a peasant family, and this baby's future is already, determined, designed, okay? So this baby will spend the entire life in the future on this land and working as a peasant, right? You have no authority to migrate, okay, to move, right? So you're tied to this land, okay? So this kind of society, there's no mobility, right? And it's a problem because when there's no stagnation, right? There's no mobility, so we can paraphrase into that the society is stagnated, right? A stagnated society, there's no exchange, no trade, right? And no motivation to innovate, to invent, right? So whatever the society has is pretty much it. There's no development, right? So that kind of doom European society into this dark age time period, right? Well, so after a few centuries, the social and wealth gap gradually being enlarged, right? So peasants, they work the hardest, but they enjoy the least, right? And the nobles, as their land expand, they can be granted by their monarch, okay, with another land, so they can, multiply their wealth, right? So the wealthy become wealthier, right? And the poor suffer the most. Why? Because the taxation on the peasants, okay, can change based on the lord's decision. If the lords, okay, the nobilities or the monarch, now they decided to confront with the foreign states, right, and engage their nation in the war. So the lord now need more fund to support the war, right? Where did the lord get their fund, their money? The peasants, right? So the peasants kind of, have to suffer from this, ongoing taxation increase, right? So to a point, they could barely make a living for their own family, right? So that would lead to the discontent of this, peasants, social class. So eventually, in England, okay, we have a English peasant revolt took place in 1381. So this is a result of this, cornered peasants. They're fed up, and to a point they have nothing else to lose, right? So they fall back, right? So the problem of this feudalism is the poor is doomed to be poor, and even worse, getting poorer, right? And the wealthy, okay, they could just take from this social bottom, the peasants, right, according to their needs or their desire, right? So the social wealth gap enlarged. So to a point, the social bottom, right, they will fight back. So during this feudalism era, Europeans, number one, the economy was not developed at all. Why? Because there's no mobility, right? When there's no mobility, there's no trade. When there's no trade, the economy is in stagnation, right? So pretty much you're, you just doomed to whatever you have. Okay, there's no improvement. And then social wealth gap enlarged, right? So that will lead to social conflicts, right? And you will see riots, rebellion, okay, on the daily manual, right? So that's the future problems, okay. And this, once again, is the social structure back then in European feudal system, okay. Now, we talk about feudal system. Coincidentally, right, stayed away in Japan. Somehow Japan developed their own feudalism society. So when we talk about Japan, the timeline of Japanese history goes like that. In the initial stage, Japan was under this nomadic claim society, nomadic claim, right? So the difference between claim and tribe is tribe. It's a group of people live together, right? And not necessarily means they're related to each other. But when you see claim, okay, again, it's a group of people live together under this nomadic lifestyle. But the difference is people within this claim, they are blood related. Okay. So they're the typical big family, right? So Japan's society at the very beginning was this, nomadic scattering claims, right? And then when the time comes to Tang Dynasty, right? Remember Tang, we talk about that? The glory of the prosperity of this Tang Middle Kingdom, right? And later Song, right? Kind of appealed to Japanese society, right? So Japan actually came to China, right? And became one of the tributary state, right? And so tribute to Tang government and later Song government, right? In exchange for protection, and also obtain the privilege to trade with China, right? And then Japan kind of admire how China could achieve such prosperity. So Japanese want to learn from China, right? So that time during Tang and Song dynasty, Japan actually tried to learn from China. So they copy, paste the entire political system, even the building, the construction. So they built, the identical palace in their capital, that kind of mirroring Chang'an, right? And then they want to learn from China. So they said, okay, so China has this centralized government with one man in charge called emperor. And that's what Japan had. Okay, so Japan became a centralized government and they have their emperor as well, right? But later on, Japanese society was like, nah, this system didn't really work for us. Why? Because for Tang and Song to practice this centralized government within this big empire, it worked because China has this Confucianism, right? And then prior to Tang Dynasty, we have Sui to lay the foundation of a centralized society, right? But Japan did not have that kind of, history as their foundation to support this kind of new type of government, right? So Japan was like, nah, this system is not for us. And that is why Japan gradually changed into this feudalism. All right, feudalism, right? So that gives you the timeline of how Japan gradually transformed from a, scattering nomadic claim society into a centralized government that they learned from China, and then change into this feudalism society, right? So when they change from claim society to a, centralized government, that is called the Taika reform. Taika reform, right? So Taika reform, they built their own sort of empire because they have an emperor, right? And their capital is in Kyoto, okay? And then they have an emperor, just like China, right? And later on, Buddhism also found its way to Japan, right? Because Japan tried to learn everything they could from China, right? And China, at first, Tang Dynasty was okay to Buddhism, but later on, they started to oppress Buddhism, right? And that kind of, forced Buddhism to find a new home. So, well, Japan sounds pretty ideal, right? So Buddhism found its way to Japan, right? But Japan has their own belief system as well. They have their local beliefs, right? So this syncretization, so Japanese society had their own local beliefs to begin with, but now they have the new religion being introduced to them. It's called Buddhism, right? So they incorporate their local beliefs along with Buddhism, and they created their new belief system, all right? So they're Japanese Shinto Buddhism, right? So Shinto Buddhism is the incorporation of Japanese local belief along with Buddhism. It's called Shinto Buddhism, all right? Okay, but later on, when Japan realized this, centralized government doesn't really work for them, and they developed this, feudalism system, right? So even though Europe and Japan was considered as like a world apart, right? But Japan somehow, simultaneously, transformed into this feudalism, right? And then their feudal system kind of mirroring European feudal system as well, with a slightly different. What kind of difference? The term is different, okay? And the social class in Europe, we have four different classes. In Japan, we have 5, right? So here in Europe, on top of this social hierarchy is the king. In Japan, it's called shogun, right? So it's a shogun, it's not emperor, it's just the king, right? And then in Europe, we have nobles, and in Japan, we have daimyos, okay, daimyos. So Lord of York in Japan would be daimyos of Nagasaki, okay? And then we have knights in Europe, and in Japan, we have samurai, okay, samurai, okay? And in Europe, knights, they honor this, chivalry spirit or practice. So when you hear people say chivalry, it refers to spirit of knights, right? So spirits of knights is like you are loyal to your nobles, your lord, and at the same time, you devote to protect your lowest people, the peasants. All right, that's called chivalry. Right, and in Japan, samurai. Okay, do they have any kind of code of conduct or code of moral? Yes, it's called bushido. Bushido. Again, you are only royal to your daimyos, right? And if you failed your mission, okay, given by your daimyo, okay, a bushido spirit demand this samurai to commit suicide, right? So next one, in Europe, we have the peasants as the lowest social class, and in Japan, not yet though. We do have farmers and fishermen, but underneath that we have merchants. So in Japanese feudalism society, the social hierarchy, okay, the lowest class is not peasant. It is actually the merchants. Anybody care to think about why? Why merchants' social status is even lower than farmers and fishermen back then in Japanese feudalism? Anybody?
I think it was because they only sell things and they don't produce things. So that's why they're lower than the people who actually make things.
Well, but modern days, merchants also only, sell things they don't produce, but who kind of like that, oh, that's an entrepreneur, right? So back to you, Jason, why? Modern days, we do not look down upon all these, entrepreneurs, right? We actually kind of, admire them.
Because they actually contribute to the economy, and I'm not sure about this, but I think Japan didn't have that sort of merchants contribute a lot to the economy system.
Ah, very good. Thank you. And the reason why is because it's feudalism, right? So feudalism is a what? It's a self-sufficient society. So they don't rely their economic development on trade at all. Okay. And on top of that, Japan or like in China or Europe, okay, pretty much the whole world, it's an agriculture society, right? So agriculture society, people rely on this plantation, right? And in order to obtain food, right? So farmers and fishermen, they actually produce. They do, right? And they provide for the society. Merchants, no, you produce nothing. You just trade, sell things, right? So you do not contribute to the society in that case, right? So that's why in Japan, merchants' social class is even lower than farmers and fishermen back to the feudalism era. But in modern days, not necessarily, because now we are practicing this capitalism pretty much, right? And with this global trade, so economic development is basically based on what? The trade right now, right? So your production GDP, and then once you produce, you cannot sell that. Otherwise, you ended up with a whole bunch inventory, right? That's meaningless, pointless, right? So modern days, the whole world rely heavily upon specialization and trade. So in this case, merchants plays very vital role. They trade, all right? And then back to agricultural society, not really. They don't need trade. They live under this self-sufficient lifestyle, right? So merchant, you're not really contribute to the society's need, right? But farmers and fishermen, they did, right? That explains why merchant is at the social class bottom, right? So that's a feudalism, right? Next, we talk about Vikings, Mongols, and the Black Death, all right? So once again, period one, we have two units, right? Unit one is how the world gradually integrated with each other, right? Through this military conquering, right? And then through the military conquering, the cultural, okay, also is being introduced, right, to the conquered states, right? And then after that, we talk about this land-based empire, right? So how these empires, one after one, they establish their empire and secure their legitimacy, right, and claim their authority and exercise power over the conquered people, right? So far we have Islamic empire, we have Chinese empire, and we also have an ocean away in America, we have Aztec empire, we have Inca empire, right? Okay, and through this building of states, right, the world become like interengaged with each other, right? And aside from this military conquering, we also have trade, right? We also have a trade to introduce culture to, the different world, right? So the cultural synchronization happened, right? Now we're gonna talk about, besides military, besides merchants, right? We also have two major players in this time period. One is Vikings, the other is Mongols, right? They also kind of, consider us responsible for this, integration of the world, right? So Vikings, they are pirates to begin with, right? So Vikings, they starting in England, right? And Vikings began a 3 centuries stretch of dominating Europe and Mediterranean coast. Why? How come they were able to do so? Because they invented a new type of ship. Okay, this ship is shallow, long ships, like the photo right here, right? Because it's long, right? And it's shallow, it's narrow as well. Okay, so they can travel through like a very narrowed waterway, right? So that kind of give them the privilege when they are battling other merchant boats or like a warship, because they can take the shortcut and surprise their enemies, right? So Vikings were able to sail across the sea, okay, and penetrate the deep into this estuaries, right, and rivers. Okay, these kind of narrow waterway is not available for any merchant boats to travel upon, right? So they could raid and conquer locals, right? So they're basically just pirates, right, Vikings, and they're so fast and they show no mercy at all. Okay, so they when you see this Vikings boat, when you see the first sight, it's too late because they're so fast. Okay, when you realize, oh my God, here comes Vikings, okay, too late. You have nowhere, no place to go, to run to, right? So, and when they pirate cities, right, they prefer religious sites, especially Christian, especially in Europe, right? Why they prefer to raid religious sites and monasteries? Well, easy to understand, because all these churches, right, they have all this these artworks that actually made of like valuable gold, silver, or copper, right? So to raid these churches makes sense because they're pirates. They're aiming to what? To collect wealth, right? And Viking also was the first European that actually traveled all the way to the America continent. Let me show you the map. This is how Vikings, okay, their kind of influence over Europe at that time, right? Because they can travel, see how they can cross this narrow strait, right? And then worship could not, right? So, and because their boat is small, right? Shallow and narrow and long, right? So they could make their way across this narrow waterway, okay? And raided the coast, the poor city, right? And normally they target churches, right? And then when they're, kind of, enjoying their raids upon Europe, they somehow travel all the way to Vinland in 1000-ish CE, okay, also in Greenland, okay, in 982. So the very first European, because the Vikings, they're also Europeans, right? So the very first European that actually discovered America was not Columbus, it was the Vikings. But Vikings, first of all, they did not know they were actually in a new continent. They did not, they thought they're still in Europe, right? And even though they made their voyage to America, right? They did not settle down here, okay? Because they're there, seamen, right? So they came back to Europe. And Columbus later on the other hand, he actually started to trade with Indians and then lead to this European colonization in America. So Columbus' discovery of the continent of America actually is more significant than Vikings accidentally arriving in America, right? So this is Vikings, right? So they are the first Europeans that accidentally, okay, kind of discover America, but they did not even realize that's America, right? And Vikings, their legacy, okay. So when we talk about legacies, is how they influence the world later on, right? And the legacy is the Vikings, they are a very pivotal role in forcing most Europeans to adopt the feudal system, right? So we talk about how this feudalism gradually became adopted in European society, right? First was the conflicts amongst these different nations, right? Goths, Germanic, right? You name it. And later on is, the attack from Vikings, right? So European society is like, okay, that's it. I cannot make it on my own. I need someone to protect me, right? So this feudalism gradually found its way to Europe again, and eventually become the only system that being practiced in Europe, right? So the Vikings also spurred trade, okay, throughout Europe, of course, and the Mediterranean Sea. Also, they helped to facilitate of the spread of bubonic plague, okay. So this bubonic plague, Black Death, right, was originated from Asia and brought by Mongols, conquering to the Minor Asia and then find its way to Europe. So Mongols, they brought Black Death over land route, and Vikings spread it over through this waterway, right? And that's why Black Death become, devastating to European society. Pretty much all the states, they had to deal with this, contagious disease, right? The pandemic, right? So that's Vikings. Now, let's talk about Mongols. All right, Mongols, they started to rise up in the 13th century, okay? And their power, their influence lasts all the way till, the second half of 14th century, right? And Mongols originally, again, their claim, just like Japanese, right? They are like this nomadic claim, and then live in the North Asia, okay? And then constantly harassed China, okay, at the border. And then Genghis Khan, okay, that's Genghis Khan, right? So Genghis Khan, he managed to unite this Mongolian tribes, not just Mongolian tribes though, along with this Turkic tribes, right? And started to build up his mass Mongol empire, right? So back then, no other force could compare with Mongolian power, right? And they conquered first. They marched down south, right? They're from North Asia, and so they marched down south, and their first target would be China, okay? And after that, they started to expand the west, right? So from China, they after that they attack and conquer Persia. Okay, remember Persia? The before the rise of Islam, the Persian Empire was actually known as what? Sassanid, remember Sassanid, right? So Sassanid and Empire coexist with the Byzantine Empire, right? And in between we have the Arabian world, right? Because that time Muhammad hadn't established Islam yet. But later on in 622, Islamic power rise up, unified Arabic world, right? And then the first four caliphs, right? They managed to spread out Islamic influence. All this happened before the rise of Mongol, right? So the Islamic states we talk about so far, okay? All this happened before the rise of Mongolian Empire, right? So at this point, what do we have as Islamic, power? We have Abbasid, right? We have Abbasid Caliphate, right? So Mongol managed to take down China, so ended the Song dynasty and established Yuan dynasty, right? And take down Persia, okay, and take down Abbasid Caliphate. So the Islamic State, it's kind of ended at this point, right? And instead we have Mongol Empire, and then Central Asia as well, and the Kievan Rus, that would be modern days Russia, right? So Mongol established the biggest land-based empire. This is what we call land-based empire, because their empire is what? On the land. Unlike sea-based empire, like a good example would be what? Spain, right? And United Kingdom, right? So Spain, their motherland is in Europe, right? Iberian Peninsula, but their empire spread out pretty much all over the world, right? In India, in Southeast Asia, right? And later on in America. So their empire is like some here, some there, is everywhere. But Mongol is different. It's a consecutive land over this big piece of land, right? So that's why we call it a land-based empire. So their empire is together, unlike Spanish Empire, British Empire is like everywhere in the world, right? So Mongol established the biggest land-based empire. And modern days, we also have a pretty big land-based, not empire, but state. That would be Russia. This is Russia, modern day Russia, right? There are 11 time zones within Russian's territory. 11, okay? So if you want to celebrate New Year 11 times, you go to Russia. You just constantly, travel west, so you can celebrate New Year 11 times, right? So that's Mongol. Okay, they made the record. Okay, and then just like Rome, when Roman Empire started to rise up, they did not know they would grow into such a significant empire. They did not know. They just conquer, follow whatever their heart told them. Okay, so follow your heart. Okay, so Mongol, same, just like Rome, they expand without a plan. That's a big humiliation to the states being conquered by Mongol. Mongol is like, well, now we're here, why not, right? So they have no plan. They just follow, wherever they go, and they evaluate, okay, manageable or not. Probably we can, take down this state. Let's do it. All right. So they did not have a plan, but eventually they established the biggest land-based empire, right? But after Mongol conquered a state, their system policy is a bit different in comparison to Islam. Islam will attempt to convert the conquered people, right? Directly or indirectly, but normally it's like, by offering incentive, right? So it's somehow you will make a rational decision and you convert, right? But Mongol is different. After Mongol conquer a state, a territory, right? Mongol pretty much granted autonomy to the conquered land, right? So you can keep your local government. You can continue to practice your culture, religion, right? Belief, right? Mongol did not, want the conquered people to convert into whatever. Okay, so what did Mongol want in that case? Well, you have all the effort in conquering people, but after that you granted the local people the autonomy and their local government and everything. So what's the purpose for that? Well, as long as the conquered people, they, number one, recognize the authority of Mongol. Number one, recognize the authority of Mongol. All right, so your government now is Mongol. Okay, that's your big boss now, right? And then number two, you pay tax, so tributary, sort of. Okay, so Mongol Empire is more leaning towards this sort of like a confederacy, because the local government still maintain their autonomy, Okay, so Mongol, they built the biggest land-based empire in Asia, right? Eurasia, right? And then after Genghis Khan died, his son Ogadai continued to conquer even more, okay, after 1227, okay? And then Kublai, the grandson, eventually conquered Song dynasty, right? They first took down just, part of Song dynasty, forced Song dynasty to relocate their capital, okay? But Kublai took down Song dynasty once for all and established Yuan dynasty, right? So the rise of Mongol kind of, changed the Asian history right here. Entire Asia pretty much it was dominated by Mongol Empire, okay? But one unique feature is what Mongol did not force the conquered people to convert into whatever, okay? So the local people was able to maintain their own culture, their own language, their own government system, as long as you recognize Mongol is now your new government and you pay tax to Mongol. That's good enough, right? So Mongol was established by Genghis Khan, right? So the leader's term, okay, the term for the leader for Mongol is Khan, right? So the empire Mongol built, well, it's a Khanate, right? So Khanate. So Mongolian Khanates. Genghis Khan made the conquering. His son, okay, Ogadai continued the expansion. And then when it comes to the grandson generation, the desire to fight over who has the authority to inherit whatever wealth their fathers, grandfather left them, lead to the division of the Mongol Empire. So the Mongol Empire, this one, is now being divided into four khanates. Right? So this four, number one, the Great Khanate, right here. The Great Khanate refers to Yuan dynasty, the biggest one, right? And after that, we have Khanate of Chagatai. So that's in the Central Asia. Modern days, the states right here is all ends with stan, right? So, excuse me, Khanate of Chagatai right here. And then to the west, we have a Khanate of Persia, also known as Eokan. That's the modern days Iran right here. So Iran, believe it or not, was actually once under Mongolia's rule, right? And up north, we have the Khanate of Kipchak. It's also known as Golden Horde. That would be the modern days Russia. So Mongol actually ruled over Russia for almost 4 centuries, all right? And that was the only time Russia was under this foreign powers rule, okay? The only foreign power that managed to invade and conquer Russia was Mongol. Later on, Napoleon attempt but failed. Hitler attempt but failed. Only Mongol made it, right? So the entire Asia pretty much is under one power, right? That's Mongol. But if you look at here in India, we actually have a Sultanate of Delhi. Sultanate of Delhi. Still remember Delhi? Delhi is Persia and what? Turkish government, right? Islamic government. So it's a what is it? Turkey, Persian, a Sunni Islam state, right? And they managed to conquer the northern part of India, but then never expand their power down south. That's because down south, India already had the strong belief system called Hinduism, right? And on top of that, remember Delhi Sultanate was not very tolerant to religious conflicts, right? So they were oppress these Hindus or Buddhists, right? That make this Islamic government in India very unpopular. And later on, they will be replaced with another Islamic government called Mughal. Okay, but we'll talk about that later, right? So this is the 4 khanates divided in the grandson's generation of Genghis Khan, right? So that's the Khanate. So we have these 4 Khanates, right? So even though they're divided into 4 Khanates, but they still continue to practice the same government structure. So tributes were collected, like tax. Also, people were used as human shields and soldiers and slaves. So when Mongol conquered new states, new land, they would adopt this locals' innovation, technology, and even kidnap the local people and use them as laborers, slaves in this case, or enlist them into their army as soldiers. Also, they use conquer people as human shields when they're in the battlefield. They use these conquer people as human shields, right? So at the heights, you will see these khanates. They actually facilitate trade and development. Okay, despite the brutality, how Mongol armies treated this, conquer people, but actually Mongol was responsible to this revival of Silk Road. Okay, so Silk Road was actually, initiated back to Han Dynasty, right? So when the martial emperor Han Wudi, sent Zhang Qian, right, try to Tongxi, right? So Zhang Qian was actually traveling all the way to the west, to Islamic world, try to find allies to fight against Xiongnu, right? But Zhang Qian failed to do so, but he realized that, hey, China actually can, travel along this route and reach the west, right? Because China, geographically speaking, kind of explain why Chinese society back then was like isolated to the rest of the world as well. Because if you look at this map up north, right, it's Siberia. So for Chinese people to travel up north, it's not an ideal choice, right? And to the east is the mass waterway, right, Pacific Ocean. So you cannot have very advanced technology in order to travel the big Pacific Ocean, right? You want to go south, okay, China here, you want to go south, and there's a Himalaya mountain, right? So kind of block the way. So only way for Chinese to actually reach out to the rest of the world was through the west, right? So that's why in Han Dynasty, Han government actually kind of promote the idea of trade along the Silk Road. And that's how China was, reaching out to the world back then in Han Dynasty. So Silk Road was like, thriving from Han, and then later on Qing Han, Sui, Tang, Song, right? But to a point when Islamic power rise up, right? This Islamic Empire Abbasid, right? Because they are Muslims, right? So they are not so friendly to European merchants. So Muslim merchants, they monopolize the Silk Road trade, right? And later they also monopolized Indian Ocean trade, right? But when Mongol took down the Islamic Empire, and Mongol did not really care about this religious difference, right? So this newly reunified Mongolian empire, right, kind of like encourage this Silk Road trade again, right? So Mongols, despite their brutality upon the people they conquered, but they actually contribute to the revival of Silk Road trade, right? And then spreading technology and disease, right? But unlike the Turk and other empire, right, Mongol actually, they allow religious freedom, right? And they also granted this local government's autonomy. That's how Mongol was able to rule over this super big empire, right? Okay, so that's the cognate. Now let's talk about the Black Death in the 1300s, 14th century, right? So Black Death, the reason why it's called Black Death was once the patient, okay, an individual started to show this symptom, proving that this individual is affected by this Black Death, they will have this skin mutation, something like that, okay? And when their skin started to turn black, that's a sign of terminal stage of this disease. And once your skin started to turn black, you don't have much time left, right? So that's why people call it Black Death, Black Death. When the skin started to turn black, it's, the god of death, it's not far from you, okay? So the Black Death was brought to the Afro-Eurasia, mainly by Mongol, right? So Mongol conquered China, right? Central Asia and Abbasid Caliphate, right? And Eastern Europe as well. So they connect trade extensively. That's the one contribution. But on top of that, they're also responsible for this outbreak of the Black Death, right? So this Black Death eventually reached Byzantine Empire in 1347, right? So once it reached Byzantine Empire include part of this European land, right, in Balkans. And that's how this Black Death found its way to Europe, right? And then later on traveled to Italian city-states, right? And then the Middle East and pretty much entire Europe, okay? And the death rate of this Black Death that time was pretty high, 50 to 90%. So once being diagnosed with a Black Death, okay, there are at least 50% chance, okay, this individual may end up dead, right? So this Black Death, wipe out at least 1/3 population of Europe and China, right? And especially in this urban area, because that kind of makes sense. Pandemic has the deadly impact when the population density is high, because pandemic is contagious. That's why in the past 3 years, right, we try to follow this social distance policy, right? Try not to get ourselves in the crowd, because crowd is more likely will get affected, right? So this Black Death wipe out Europeans population by 1/3, right? So the society was horrified, right? And it was the art, writing, painting that took this apocalyptic tone, right? It's like a man, is that the sign of end of world, right? And the focus on mostly like death and despair. So you see the painting, right? Very dark in the background, right? And show you the other one, this one. Okay, so this is again, it's a painting. Okay, that was introduced back then in the Black Death era in Europe. Right, so people started to lose faith in the church. Why? Because they don't have any scientific explanation of this new disease, right? And especially when a patient was about to die, their skin turned black. It's like black is kind of associated with this devil's color, right? So there's like what did we do wrong? Father, what did we do wrong? Why God punished us this way? But the church had no answer. And even worse, the priests themselves was affected and they die, right? So God's messenger supposedly is the vehicle to deliver God's message to people, right? And pray for the people, to appeal to God for protection and better future life. But instead, this vehicle, these priests, they themselves got affected and died. So people was like, well, the church cannot protect us anymore. We cannot protect ourselves, right? So European society gradually lose faith in Roman Catholic Church because of this, right? So that's the Black Death. Okay, the impact, first one is what? Is this population decline, right? So as a result, you will see Europe was experiencing this shortage, big shortage in labor force. All right, and later on, the plague eventually ended. It was like affecting European life for almost 15 years, but eventually it just ended. People was like, why? How this Black Death ended? Because that time there's no vaccine, nothing. So how come this pandemic ends in European society? Anybody? Today we have vaccine, we have medicines, to cope with this COVID-19, right? Yes, Lucas.
It's because they got immunity, because it's like genetic mutations and stuff.
And whoever survived, right? That means your body immune system developed, this immunity, right, to fight against this virus. Okay, and also another reason explain how this Black Death eventually just faded away and gone. It's because with 1/3 of European population died because of this disease, right? So you see this population density decline. And on top of that, people, once they realize, this disease is contagious, right? So I probably want to avoid the contact with other people. But if you live in the urban city, you cannot, you cannot avoid this people contact, right? So you will find Europeans started to move out of the urban city to the countryside, right? So that kind of slowed down this disease, right? You have fewer cases. So that's how this pandemic gradually faded away. Okay, one is the immune system developed by our own body, right, to cope with the virus. Two is population density decline. So that will not be an ideal society for pandemic to, rise, okay, or to spread out. Okay, and the reason why we have the population density decline due to two parts. One is, 1/3 of people died, right? So density decline, and whoever survived or not yet affected, they ran away from the city, right? So negative impact, one is the labor shortage, that's one, okay, and two is city life become to decline, right? And also this interregional trade, like Mongolians soon lost control of the empire, right? That's understandable because this social issue of Black Death, right? That will lead to the people, the societies, what doubts on their incumbent government, right? So the government cannot protect them, right? So they lose faith, okay, and lose support to their government. But we do have positive impact though, because when the pandemic gradually faded away, right? So the whole European society, they gonna rebuild, right, after this pandemic. So they started to pick up where they left, right? Started to produce, right? And then they need to find laborers, right? So in this case, employment opportunities for women, because we have a labor shortage, right? 1/3 population died. So women became participating in this labor force, okay? Prior to the pandemic, women's role was more associated with domestic, okay, especially in this agricultural society, right? It's in family, okay, within the family, men are on the field to work, women take care of the family, right? Prepare meals, right? Tidy up the family, the house, right? But now they need to produce, right? They need labor, so they started to hire women, right? And also, laborers now have a privilege to negotiate with a higher wage, right? Because the demand for labor is high now, right? But the supply of labor is low, right? So this positive impact mainly is for this laborers, and then also women laborers, right? And then full of trade, Mongol, right? Anti-Islamic attitude actually spurred this desire for Europeans to find their own path to Asia, right? Because this Black Death actually contributed to the fall of Mongol Empire, right? So Mongol Empire, you may wonder why this great empire eventually failed. Well, because despite they allowed the local autonomy, right? So how come they managed to avoid unnecessary local riots? They still fell. Well, because of this Black Death. That's one reason. And number two is, Mongolian, they're, fierce when they're on horseback. Okay. They are this uncompatible warriors. Okay. But once they settle down, they just didn't know how to wrong the government. Right. They try to learn, just adopt whatever was already pre-existing, right? And try to, use the old system to govern over the conquered people, but they don't know how. Okay. That's another reason, right? So Black Death damage Mongolians' authority or legitimacy. So people started to question the government, right? And then eventually Mongol fell, right? So Mongol fell, then we witnessed the second time of the rise of Islam, right? So after Abbasid fell to Mongol, so Mongolian Empire exists for like a century, and then it failed due to Black Death and unfamiliar of this running government, the whole structure and system. So Mongol failed, and Islam rise again, right? So the Islamic Empire, there's a gap between this Islamic Empire, and that gap was due to Mongolians conquering, right? Okay, so that's Vikings, Mongols, okay, and Black Death. All right. Now we can move on to period 2. So unit 1, pretty much we cover all the topics now. All right. So the state building, right? How this rising new empires managed to conquer the neighboring states, and at the same time, introduce their own culture, okay, to the conquered people, and how our world gradually integrate together. But so far, when we say our world, we exclude America. Even though America did exist, right? We talk about Aztec, we talk about Inca, right? But they are unknown to the rest of the world. And the rest of the world at that point refers to Afro-Eurasia, okay? And in period 2, okay, we are about to include America into this already known world, right? So unit 2, we're gonna focus on how Europeans discover the New World. The reason is New World is because it was not known to Afro-Eurasia at all that time. Even though Vikings, right, they accidentally traveled to Vinland, but they did not even know they were in a different continent, right? They thought it was just an island in Europe, right? So period 2, starting from year 1450, ended in 1750, all right? So 3 centuries, what happened during this 300 years in the world? So basically, big idea number 1 is Europeans discovered the New World. So this topic, the question we're gonna ask ourselves again is, what is it? All right, what is Age of Exploration, and why did it happen, and how did it happen? Right. So when you study a historical topic, these are the 3 major questions you ask yourself. What is it? All right. Why did it happen? And then how? How, again, 2 ways to interpret, right? Use how to indicate means, right? So, by what, through what can Europeans manage to trade with America and later colonize America? So means how, right? Also, we need to think about this level how, right? So level how is associated with what? With the impact, right? So this European colonization over America lead to what kind of impact? How bad or how good this colonization contribute to Europe, to America, right? So level how. So as long as you ask yourself these 3 questions, okay, you're solid, right? What is it? Okay, so you need to know the historical background. That's your knowledge. And why did it happen? That explains the cause, right? And how did it happen? That's the means, right? So that will relate it to, like, technology, innovation, right? Culture, whatever. And then level how is the effect, right? So these 3 questions cover you the fact, and then the cost and effect, right? So Age of Exploration, now we know what, right? Is when the Europeans, after the Europeans, they discovered the New World and then started to trade with the Indians, and then later on, what? They colonized Indians, right? So that's the what part. And why? Now let's talk about why. Okay, why part is, go back to Mongol, all right? So after Mongol failed, right? Black Death and their lack of experience in governing, right? A permanent settlement, right? Then Islam rise again, right? And this time, what Islamic power rose up? It's Ottoman, right? So Ottoman, it's a group of Turkish Muslim, all right? Remember how Mongol granted autonomy to conquer people, right? So within this conquered states, we have a Turkish Muslim, right? And their leader was Os, right? So whoever follow Os family, they call themselves Osman, right? So when Osman conquered Constantinople, of Byzantine Empire. All right, so where's Byzantine Empire? Byzantine Empire. So this is right here, Byzantine Empire, right? So after the capital of Byzantine Empire, Constantinople, fell to Osman, right? Then that's the end of the entire Roman Empire, all right? Because the Eastern Roman Empire gone, right? So that's the finish point of Roman Empire. So no more Byzantine Empire, right? And replaced with what? Osman, right? Osman, but they call themselves Ottoman Empire, right? Ottoman Empire, and under the Oz family's rule, right? And they are Muslim, right? They're Muslim, and so they practice Islam, right? So when Ottoman is now in charge in the previous Byzantine Empire, and remember Byzantine Empire plays pretty important role in this Silk Road trade between Asia and Europe, right? So the trade route was Asian merchants to travel west, right? Along with Indian merchants, right? They did not go all the way to Europe, to the West Europe. No, that's too far. So they came to Byzantine Empire, right? And the major trade city was Anatolia, right? So Anatolia was the major trade city. It has the access to the port of Mediterranean Sea, right? So that would allow Italian merchants to travel to Anatolia with European goods, right? And then they can trade with Asian merchants. That's how the Silk Road trade worked, right? So Asian merchants, they took this Silk Road and arrived in Byzantine Empire in Anatolia, okay, this trade city. And then Italian merchants, they have the access to the Mediterranean Sea, right? So they would play the major role in this Silk Road trade for Europe, right? So they came to Byzantine and trade. And then they went back home to Italy and traded with West European merchants, right? But now, Byzantine Empire is gone, right? And the new government is Islamic government, and religious conflicts somehow prevent this pre-existing Silk Road trade between Asia and Europe, right? So Ottoman Empire was not so friendly and kind to European merchants anymore, okay? Because they're different religious practice, right? And so that kind of forced Europe is like, oops, we still need to trade with Asia, right? Because it's been an ongoing activity for centuries. So all of a sudden, we don't have our trade. And how do we, rely on our economy? Nothing. So Europeans was like, well, we need to find a new way to reach Asia. That kind of makes sense, right? So that kind of motivate the very first European state, Portugal, to initiate this age of exploration, right? But Portugal, their monarch, the king, King Henry the Navigator, right? He had the ambition to discover a new way to reach Asia. And the new way, if you want to take the land route, no longer available because you have what? Ottoman Empire here, right? But if you want to go all the way up north through Asia, good luck. You got to go through this extreme weather, right? In Siberia. If you can make it to Asia, then well, congratulations. But when you go back home, that's another risk, right? So land route is no longer possible. It's out of the picture. So Henry the Navigator, the Prince of Portugal, come up with this idea. How about we travel along the west coast of Africa? Let me remove this so you can have the better view of this map. So Portugal right here, right? Their route is they travel along the west coast of Africa, all the way down south to the southern tip, Cape of Hope, right? And from here, they have the access to Indian Ocean. Look, once they arrive in Indian Ocean, they arrive in Asia. So Portugal was the first European power that managed to discover a new way to reach Asia and continue the trade with Asia. And because it was Portugal's, idea, and that kind of makes sense. This Indian Ocean trade is now dominated by Portugal, right? So they control Indian Ocean trade mainly where? India, East Africa, West Africa, and from India, they get the access to Southeast Asia, all right? So Malaysia, Singapore, Thailand, okay, you name it, right? And from there, they can continue to sail up north so they can trade with China, with Japan, all right? So that's Portuguese trade route. Okay, so if you look at this trade route, it's, much longer way to reach Asia, right? But it worked. And this trade route will go through Africa, Asia, right? And involve Europe as well. So it's the Afro-Eurasia trade, still the same. So this route is the trade in the old world, right? Nothing changed. The trade still the same, just different route, right? But Spain, on the other hand, okay, they took the new route. Okay, here is Spain in purple, right? So with the Columbus's approach to the monarch of Spain, right? King Ferdinand and Queen Isabella, right? He was financially supported by Spanish monarch, right? And Columbus did not take, the Portuguese route because he believed the earth was not flat, it was round, right? So Columbus believed in this concept that the world, our earth is actually round. Since it's round, right? You want to go to Asia, not necessarily means you can only go east. It can go west, right? And go west, according to Columbus's understanding of the world, he did not know there's a continent called America. He did not know there's another ocean called Pacific Ocean. He believed Atlantic Ocean is the only barrier between Europe and Asia. Okay, if you go west. So if you travel across Atlantic Ocean, the other end of this ocean will be Japan, right? So if America was not there, and then Pacific Ocean is not there, and then he was right? So once you cross the Atlantic Ocean, the first land you see is Japan. He was right, okay. But he he also believed that Japan was part of India, though. Okay, so his plan was travel across Atlantic Ocean that will bring me to Japan, India, all right? And once I'm in Japan, India, I can continue to trade with India for spice, right? And then I can just stop on the way to travel to trade with China for silk and tea, right? So his idea was rejected by his own monarch. He was actually Portuguese, right? So his idea was rejected by Prince Henry the Navigator, because he was more like a conservative individual. He still believed in the concept that Earth is flat, right? So when Columbus brought this idea to his own prince, they said, "Hey, how about we go west?" And the prince said, "You're crazy, okay? If you go west, you will reach the age of the Earth, all right? And then you'll fall into the unknown universe, all right?" And then, so Columbus did not give up, so he approached Spain, and Spanish monarch believing him, right? And believe, yeah, what if he was right? If the Earth is really round, and we can discover this new route to reach Asia, then we can monopolize it, and then we're gonna make a big fortune, right? So it's this incentive to monopolize a new trade route with Asia that really provoke this age of exploration in Spain, right? So Spain financially support Columbus, and Columbus sailed the ocean blue in 1492, right? And then according to his calculation, he should have arrived in Japan, India. Okay, so when he saw the land, where? In Caribbean Sea, right here. Okay, Puerto Rico, this region, right? And he was convinced that he was in Japan, India. That's why when he encountered with the first people on the land, he referred them as Indians, right? So now we know what it is, and we know why, right? And then how part, okay, let's take a look. How was this possible to for Europeans to explore the new world. So the how means how. So ability to explore, route to China, right? So Europeans, of course, they learn from China, right? Chinese invention in this navigation system. So Europeans adopt that. So they have a new technology they rely on called the caravel. So it's a small ship like that, okay, with Latin sail. Why small is so important? Small ship enable Vikings to raid Europe, right? And small ship enable the Europeans to travel across Atlantic Ocean, right, and arrive in America. Because it's small, that means what? You can travel faster and it's more flexible to cope with the weather, the nature, right? So on top of that, Europeans also enjoy the help of compass, right? So compass can ensure these merchants, they don't get lost in the mass ocean, right? Also astrolabe, right? So it's map making. So the map make more specifically to guide this merchant boats, okay, to locate their position, right? Before that, before this astrolabe, sailors, they have to rely on this North Star, right? So follow the North Star, then you know where you approximately are located at, right? So with all this invention, this technology, Europe was able to travel this long distance to Asia, right? To America. And on top of that, this Portland map technique. So this is another upgrade mapping for travelers on the sea. So this marking distance based on time traveled in a single direction. Okay, so you're gonna keep tracking how long you have been traveling. So use the time traveled and try to compare with this Portland map. Then you can figure out, give or take, where you should be located at this moment, right? So made it far easier to accurately chart and navigate new areas, right? So you can pinpoint, oh, I'm probably not so far from Cuba, or not so far from Canada now, right? And then Europeans also developed this better understanding of this global wind patterns. Oh, that's very important. So if we kind of understand how the pattern of wind is like, then we can take the advantage of the wind's power, right, to speed up our journey. So trade winds and westerlies, right? And this harness their patterns for travel, right? And in particular season, the wind would blow in particular direction, right? So what season it's good for you to travel from America to Europe, and which season you better off take the journey from Europe to America, right? So this ability to understand the pattern of the wind also help Europeans to better explore the new world, right? Also, this age of exploration enriched European states big time, because when they started to trade with Indians, they did not view gold and silver as valuable commodity. They only believed that gold and silver, they look pretty because they're shining, right? So in Indian society, gold and silver were pretty much used as accessories that they could wear on themselves, right? So when Columbus arrived in America and he encountered with the first group of people he referred to as Indians, Columbus was in awe because he saw all these Indians, they're wearing gold and silver everywhere, all over them, right? So Columbus's first reaction is, oh my God, these people are so rich, right? Because gold and silver, they were considered as valuable commodity. In other words, it's like what? Money, right? Currency, right? And these Indians, they just wear money on them. Oh my God, right? So Columbus was able to trade whatever he brought from Europe with Indians for what? For gold and silver. And of course, he trade for, you know, this new crops that European did not see before, right? And that enriched Europe big time, right? So very lucrative business practice as trading with the Indians, right? And of course, Spain started this trade with the Indians, right? And Spain started to accumulate their wealth and then use the money to expand their military and their navy to a point they call their own naval power. Armada. That was a Spanish term. Armada translate into English would be invincible, undefeatable, all right? Not very modest, right? So a Spanish government called their own naval force Armada, right? Why? Because their Armada was highly equipped with gunpowder, gunboat, right? So if you're a sailor, a merchant back then, you're on the sea, the least party you want to encounter would be number one, Spanish Armada. Okay, because Spain, they realized how lucrative this trade with Indians was, right? And of course, the Spanish government want to monopolize it, right? So if you want to trade with America, you need a permission from Spanish government. And the permission was so difficult to obtain, right? So some European merchants, okay, they just, sneak out their way and try to, secretly trade with Indians. But if you're encounter with a Spanish Armada, oh, you're in trouble because you're trying to steal Spanish market in America, right? So they would attack you or just simply confiscate whatever you have on boat, right? And arrest you, okay, because you violate Spanish government's interest, right? So that explains this suspense, rising up, mainly because the trade with Indians, and Indians, they're willing to use their gold and silver to purchase Europeans with bananas, grapes, right? And so it's a win-win situation for both parties. Since, Indians, they did not realize the value of gold and silver anyway. Okay, so weaponized of gunpowder, gunboats, right? That enable Europeans to better conquer this new world. Okay, or before the colonization, better to protect themselves to make it all the way to the new world to trade, right? And the other trading route, when Europeans arrived in America, they actually brought in horses, right? So these horses would significantly change Indians' in lifestyle. For one, horses enable Indian tribes to travel faster and further distance on their homeland, right? And second is later on, once Indians learn how to tend these horses, right? They can what? They can use their horses in battlefield, all right? So horses became the the most important livestock to Indian societies after the arrival of Europeans, all right? So we now know what age of exploration is. We know how they managed to make it work, right? Now next we're gonna talk about second how is level, right? How this age of exploration impact the development of Europe. Okay, this time is for Europe only, but later on it's gonna involve the rest of the world. Okay, so let's see. This is Portugal, right? So Portugal, as we mentioned earlier, focused on developed a new way to reach the old world, Afro-Eurasia trade, right? So Portugal and the old world. Okay, this is the Prince Henry the Navigator of Portugal, right? So he was a kind of an individual with new idea, but at the same time still conservative, traditional, right? So he was the one that realized, hey, Europeans, we need to find a new way to reach Asia, right? But he's traditional because he refused to believe in the concept that our Earth is round, right? So 1443, it's like a half a century before Columbus set off, right, to the America, right? So Portugal was actually the first rising power during Age of Exploration, right? So 1443, Portugal already planned to discover a new route to reach Asia, okay? And he did. And then remember his route is sailing along west coast of Africa, right? So since they are sailing alongside the west coast of Africa, might as well trade with them, right? And then that time Europeans already has the access to gunpowder, right? Thanks to Mongolia Empire, right? They introduced gunpowder to the European society. And that's how later on Ottoman Empire was able to conquer Byzantine as well through gunpowder, right? So Portugal, equipped with gunpowder, their boat sail along the west coast, and they will make stop at any trade city along the coastline and establish what we call trade post. So trade post, you can view that as like a warehouse, right? So they would have certain goods, commodities being stored in this city. So all these goods and commodities are considered as what valuable, right? So since they're valuable, you want to protect them, right? So you're gonna have armies stationed there. So a trade post, it's a military guarded warehouse. Okay, that's trade post, right? So Portugal did that along the west coast of Africa. So that gradually built a trade post empire for Portugal, right? And when they complete this trade post empire, that's including Africa, also includes India, and later on to Southeast Asia, right? So they build up their trade network with all this trade post, right? But the problem is what Portugal did not have much to offer to the world, right? Because their economy was not so ideal, right? Their manufacturing industry was not so advanced, right? That's before the industrialization anyway. So Portugal did not have much to offer to trade for, right? With other states. So Portugal came up with a new way to generate revenue, to make money. Is they started to sell what? Toll. Now they kind of control. Let me show you how big of empire they control, all right? So the red part, this is Portugal, right? And you see how this red dots, each dot indicate a trade post city, right? So along the west side of Africa, right? Even control this state, right? And Madagascar, okay, along this Indian Ocean, you see how many trade posts they built, right? So basically, they monopolize this Indian Ocean trade, right? And later on, they're gonna control Brazil as well. So Portuguese merchants, they did not have much to offer to other merchants, but they could monopolize this route, right? So if you want to trade within our territory, you're gonna pay. You're gonna pay us. So what money? What do you mean that you're gonna pay us? That means you're gonna buy cartas. Okay, cartas. So the cartas is a permit for trade. Without this cartas, you are like smuggling within Portuguese territory. All right. So Portuguese merchants and government, they use these cartas to generate revenue. Okay, and of course on top of that they have their trade as well, but just not as much as Asian merchants can have to offer, right? Okay, so this 100 to 150 years, right? You will see the first rising power in Europe would be Portugal, and Spain followed, right? So this age of exploration witnessed two major European powers, okay, growing up. The first one, Portugal, second one, Spain, right? So Portugal and Spain was the first European states to build an empire, okay, sea-based empire that the sun never sets on their empire. Portugal and Spain, and later United Kingdom, right? So Britain would follow, right? So when we see these Europeans, okay, they started to dominate the maritime trade, right? but they did not have much to offer. But they did control and run the trade for a high profit, right? So they, if they are in Japanese feudalism society, they will be placed at the bottom of the social class, right? See, they did not have much to offer, so they just control the trade and run trade for high profits, right? So in Japanese society, they were looked down upon, Portuguese and Spanish, right? So despite Portuguese and European control, right, but Asian merchants continue to thrive, right? So why? Because Asian merchants, they have a strong government behind them, right, to support them and protect them. And that would be what? Ming Dynasty, right? So Ming Dynasty, Emerald Zhenghe, right? Emirate Zhenghe, he actually made the voyage all the way to Egypt, right? And he did that 7 times, right? So Asian merchant continue to thrive, but Islamic merchant on the other way, not so much though, because Portuguese merchants, they through this selling of cartas, they generate huge profit, right? And they're gonna use the money to expand their, navy force, right? Only when you have a strong naval power, you can better secure your monopoly, right? And then to a point, they kind of outweigh the Islamic military force, right? So in this case, the rise of Portuguese merchants in Indian Ocean, they kind of the marginalized Islamic merchants, okay, who used to control this Indian Ocean trade, okay? But now it's Portuguese merchants' time, right? So these Asian merchants, they continue to thrive, right? And they continue to trade with this Arab Omani, Javanese, okay, Java is Indonesia, right? And Gujaratis, that's West Indies, right? So that's how Portugal managed to control the trade in the old world, okay? So while Portugal monopolized the old world, well, Spain also enjoy their monopoly, right? Because of their, investment in Columbus, right? So Spain controlled the New World, right? So the New World refers to America, right? So initially, Spain traded with Indians started between 1492 and 1519. Between 1492 and 1519, that's the era known as Columbian Exchange. We'll talk about that later, right? So Columbian Exchange, that time, American Indians, they were actually treated as a trading partner to Europeans, right? So they enjoyed that moment, that time period, all right? So Indians, they actually enjoy and benefit from this trade with Europeans initially, right? But that's only 27 years, right? And after 27 years, Spain became so rich. So to a point, they started to question, why even bother to trade with Indians? We definitely have the power to take them down, right? And colonize them. So if we can colonize them, whatever is theirs is now ours, right? So why buy if you can get it free, right? So that's why in 1519, Spain attacked Aztec, right, and managed to take down Aztec and started the colonization. That's in America, right? And the Spanish colonization in America lasts for 3 centuries. Aztec will later become modern day Mexico, right? So Mexico was actually born in year 1819 when they declared independence from Spain, right? So 1519, Azteca fell to Spain, and 1819, Republic of Mexico was established. So 300 years, right? So during the colonization, Spanish government benefit most from the plantation of tobacco, right? The tobacco originated from America, and once it was introduced to European society, Europeans love it, okay? Because one ingredient from tobacco is nicotine, right? So nicotine will get you addicted, right? It keep you sharp, energetic, right? But it's very addictable. So the demand of tobacco surged up in Europe, right? So that raised up the market price as well. So Spanish government's, most lucrative cash crop would be tobacco, right? And because of this tobacco, Spain, okay, their wealth, okay, whose wealth? The government. When we say government, that refers to the monarch at that time, right? Okay, so the king and the queen, okay, enjoy this influx of gold and silver. We're talking about boatload of gold and silver, right? And Spain used this gold and silver to invest in their military expansion, naval building, right? Naval power building. Also, Spain used the gold and silver to engage in war with other European states. What kind of war we're talking about? If you took European history, now you can connect this time period with the European history, right? It's the religious conflicts, right? So religious conflicts took place when Martin Luther nailed the 95 Theses at the door of the church, right? And started Protestant Reformation. Okay, so Protestant Reformation was the movement to challenge the Roman Catholic Church, right? But Spain was a very devoted Catholic state. So to Spanish government was like, I don't think so. You challenge Roman Catholic Church. It's the same thing like you challenge our authority, right? So Spain would use the money, the profit that accumulate from this trade and later colonization with Indians to engage at war against other European states, whichever attempt to undermine Roman Catholic Church's authority, right? So Spain now used the profit in military building, naval force expansion, and then engage in war because of religion with other European states, right? So you see this government spending, right? All of a sudden multiplied, right? And when the government spending increased too big, too fast, it's dangerous. It will lead to the inflation of the country. And if the inflation is not controlled, it will result in hyperflation. Hyperflation is very dangerous. Inflation is when we're talking about the price level increase more than like a give or take 5%. If the price level goes up somewhere around 5%, it will be considered as healthy economic development. Okay, but if the price raise up more than that, standard, sometimes 10%, 20%, the inflation in Europe now is like a 13%. All right, so you see the strikes ongoing in Europe right now, right? Because price level is beyond how individual household can bear, right? So Spain had the hyperflation, but the worst hyperflation ever in history, that would be the Zimbabwe, right? And also Germany after World War I, right? So that hyperflation, you would not imagine how bad it was. The price level increased not by season, not by year. It could be by hour. So the price you have now can increase an hour later. Okay, that's crazy, right? But Spain was not that crazy, but they did experience hyperflation, all right? And that gradually undermined, okay, the economic development in Spain as well. And that kind of created the opportunity for Britain, France, and Netherlands to rise up. Okay, so this is Spain and the New World, right? And so Spain, they proved that this trade with Indians was super lucrative, right? That was before the colonization. Now, of course, would provoke the jealousy of Portugal, right? So Portugal in 1443, half a century before Columbus set off to America, right? And Portugal had this pride as the rising power, the big brother in Europe. But now all of a sudden there's another rising power challenging you. And not to mention it's your neighbor state, right? Spain. So Portugal was like, I am your big brother, okay? So whatever is yours is mine, okay? So Portugal want a share of this, new world's trade. But Spain was like, no. Finder keepers, right? So it's our market, it's not yours. So the conflicts between Spain and Portugal intensified. So to a point, Roman Catholic Church, the Pope, had to work as a peacemaker to negotiate, okay, between Spain and Portugal, and eventually they come to the agreement and sign this Treaty of Tordesillas. So what is that? That's the treaty that the Pope believed. Yeah. Okay, Portugal, you started this age of exploration, right? And you're kind of gonna secure this big brother status in Europe. But Spain, they believe in, you know, the new concept of the world, right? So they are willing to take the risk to do this discovery. So they also deserve what they can claim, right? So how about we divide the world into half, right? This one, the purple, the solid purple line right here, okay? How about we divide the world into half? So the old world will be under Portugal's control, trade-wise, right? The new world will be dominated, monopolized by Spain, right? So that's the Treaty of Tordesillas, right here, this one, and it's 46 degree, right? So you see this 46 degree actually kind of like, you know, divide America in this, you know, interesting way. Most America would be under Spanish split control, except Brazil right here. That explains why when you travel to South America, Brazil is the only country that speak Portuguese, and the rest that speak Spanish, right? And that can be traced back to this colonization era. And because of this treaty, right? And thanks to the Pope, right? He kind of, you know, managed to avoid unnecessary war between Portugal and Spain, right? Okay, so now we know what the age of exploration is, and we know why it happened. We know through what way they were able to do so. And then we also know the impact on the world, right? Is the world being divided into half, right? The old world would be controlled by Portugal, and the new world dominated by Spain. But later on, Spain, we mentioned that they mismanaged their wealth, right? Government spending way too much, okay, too much and too fast, that lead to hyperflation and weaken the power of Spain, right? And that create window of opportunity for other European states to seize the opportunity and started to colonize on their own. But then here's Portugal. So Portugal closer to Latin America than Spain closer to Latin America, right? That explains why they focus on Latin America for their colonization. But other European states, where? France, right? And then Netherlands, and then Britain, right? It will be easier for them to sail for North America, right? Closer, right? So that explains why Britain later colonized the original 13 states of the United States, right? And then France colonized modern days Canada, and Netherlands colonized modern days New York State, right? Okay, so now we know age of exploration, right? And that will bring us to the next topic. It's called the Columbian Exchange. Okay, but before we do so, let's take a quick break, okay? Today, let's take 5, right? Let's come back in 5 minutes, and then we'll continue talk about Columbian Exchange, right? Let's take 5. Okay, let's come back. If you're back type 1. I just realized our class ended in 10:30. I thought it was 11. So that's why I took a break. Okay. Anyway, I think it's the holiday that messed up with my brain. Okay. Anywho, okay. We still have a good 7 minutes to go. Okay. Now let's cover the Columbian exchange. All right. Columbian exchange. What do they exchange? Okay. Let's use this one. So for better understanding, a clear idea. So basically, Columbian exchange, there are only 2 players. Who are they? Europe, American Indians, right? So it's the exchange for these goods, all right? So let's take a look at what European bought from America, all right? So tobacco, pumpkin, blah, blah, blah. But most importantly is this one, potato, okay? So potato was so essential to Europe at that time. Why? Because potato, for one, it's easy to grow. For 2, it provide calorie dense, all right? It's a calorie dense crop, meaning what? You only need to eat few, okay? And it already provides you with all the calories you need to survive a day, right? A day's work. So that would enable Europeans to what? To sustain their food needs, right? And once again, the principle in history, when there's, plenty of food and people do not need to worry about the source of food, right? They can establish, their family and have babies, right? You don't have to worry about food now, right? So more babies equals to higher population, right? So potato alone witness the population growth in Europe, right? And later on Asia. Asia adopted sweet potato, okay, but still potato, right? And then not to mention the gold and silver to enrich the government, right? So potato benefit the society as a whole, population increase, and the gold and silver enrich the European governments, all right? And from Europe to America, at first, American Indians, they benefit from the trade as well. Why? Because they have options now for their diets, right? They were introduced to European coffee or pear and the fruits, all these new crops, right? Bananas. And on top of that, the livestock, okay, really changed American Indians' lifestyle, among which pigs play pretty important role. Why? Because pig is easy to raise, right? They basically eat everything. If you have a farm, get a couple of pigs, you don't have no problem with your garbage. They pretty much eat everything, right? And then so that again increase the Indians population initially, right? Also the horse, we'll talk about that, right? Horse also change how Indians, they travel, they battle, right? So far looks pretty ideal, right? It's a win-win situation, but if you look at that, disease, okay, that would be a nightmare to Indian society, among which this one, smallpox, most threatening to Indian society. Reason why is because Indians for thousands of years never been exposed to this disease, right? So the Indian society, people did not have the immune system to fight against this disease, right? But European, on the other hand, they kind of get used to it, right? They no, not just smallpox, but pretty much everything here. All this disease, Europeans, they endure, and then they develop this immune system to fight against the disease, right? So smallpox alone wipe out at least, okay, I'm not exaggerating at all, it's at least 90% of Indian population, 90, all right? And the survivors, their future was not even ideal. They would be enslaved by Europeans, right? So this is Columbian exchange, right? And this Columbian exchange witnessed the economic growth in Europe, right? And then the plantation of tobacco became so lucrative, right? So more Europeans, they invest in this tobacco plantation. And with the demand of tobacco increase in Europe, right? So the labor demand to work on this tobacco field also increased in America. But the disease, smallpox, wipe out the Indian population, right? And the survived Indians, they're being enslaved later on. But Indians, they're not like, vanilla. They fought back, right? So they would find a way to escape and claim their freedom, right? So Europeans like, man, this labor force is difficult to manage, right? So they started to look for a new source for labor. That's why they started to import slaves from Africa. So that kind of changed this Columbian exchange. So Columbian exchange is during the trade partnership era. And later on, when the colonization began, and the slaves, African slaves, participate in this exchange. And that's what we call the Atlantic system. Atlantic system. What is Atlantic system? Again, let's take a look at this map. So it used to be two players, right, between America and Europe. Now we have one more player joining this exchange. That would be West Africa. So West Africa, it was like, city-states, right, and controlled by these warlords, right? So whoever possessed military can use this military gunpowder power, again, learn from Asia, right, to conquer people and establish their own sort of kingdom, all right? So to maintain this warlords power, they gonna make sure that their military, can play the dominant role to kind of, scare people, right? And force people to obey. So Europeans knew that the demand for gunpowder in Africa is high. Okay, and Africa itself already practiced slavery system, right? And then Europeans like, hey, what if we exchange gunpowder for slaves in Africa, and then we can solve this shortage of labor force in America, right? So they make one more stop before they arrive in America. So they would sail to West Africa first and use gunpowder and salt, right, to trade for African slaves. And then when they loaded their boat with African slaves, they sail for Caribbean Sea, and they would trade African slaves with local people for local planters for what? For sugar, for wine, rum, alcohol, and then return to Europe, right? So used to be two players, now three, right? So we have a triangle. That's why it's called triangular trade, right? So the new passage right here, right? It's called the Middle Passage. So when you see the term Middle Passage, it refers to the trade between West Africa and America for slaves, right? That's the Middle Passage, okay? So that's what we call the Atlantic system, also known as triangular trade. And in this triangular trade, there's a particular route we call Middle Passage, and that refers to the trade for African slaves, right? So that is the Middle Passage. Okay, but the labor force development actually does not go from Indian right away to African slaves, right? There is a transition, in between. So in between is what we call indentured servant, all right? So with the population decrease in American Indian society, on top of that, Indians, they know how to escape, right? So to this colonists, Indian laborers no longer feel ideal, right? So they started to offer this indentured servant. So indentured servant basically is what? They, the colonization proved to be super lucrative, right? And then the colonies started to thrive, right? And most Europeans from the social bottom, peasants, free labor, they kind of want to, go to this America and look for a second chance to make a better future for themselves and for their future generation, right? But they couldn't afford the passage, the ticket to go to America. So these colonists, these trading companies, they offer indentured servant contract. So you want to go to America, right? And you can afford it. Don't worry, we have a way for you, You sign a contract with the trading company, and you agree to work for the trading company normally for 7 years for free. But the trading company will provide you with a ticket to go to America, and they will provide you with accommodation, food, and shelter, right? And after 7 years, you honor your contract, you become a free man, And on top of that, upon the day your contract matured, then you will receive a piece of land from this colonist, this trading company, right? So it's very appealing to the general society in Europe, right? So you will see a influx of this indentured servant from Europe to America during this time period. So between Indian slaves and African slaves, we have European labor, all right? And to a point, like America, okay? There are in Jamestown, Virginia, 130,000 inhabitants, 75%, they were actually indentured servants, okay? So it's first Indian labor and then indentured servant and then African slaves, right? So what happened that the plantator, these trading companies, okay, they decided to change the labor form from indentured servant to African slaves, mainly because these indentured servants, once they are free, right, they honor their contract, they become free men, not just free men, they are now landlords, right, land owners, right? So as long as you own land in the colonies, you have the voice in the local government. And these people will be viewed as like undereducated, okay, and they should not be participate in the government. But too bad they could, because they own land. And according to the local government system, as long as you own land, you can participate in the politics, right? And this social elites, this wealthy family, everything, they look at this indentured servant as like, nah, you guys are not our people, right? And you're kind of interfere with our elite government structure, okay? That's why they change the labor force from indentured servant to African slaves, all right? Okay, so today we stop at here, Columbian exchange, right? First 2 players and later 3 players, all right? So what we covered today is feudalism, right, in Europe, right? So Europe at that time, pretty irrelevant to the world, right? But because of the fall of Byzantine Empire to Ottoman Empire, right? And so who is this Ottoman Empire? It's the new the new rising Islamic power that replaced Mongol Empire, right? Okay, and so it's kind of, you see the domino effect, right? So the fail, Black Death undermined Mongolian Empire's authority, right, and led to the fall of Mongolian Empire. That witnessed the rise of Islam again, and this time is the Turkish Muslim, right, called Osman family, and they established Ottoman Empire and take down Byzantine, right? And because of that, forcing Europeans to find a new way to trade with Asia. So we have 2 major players this time, Portugal and Spain, right? And Spain, because of their religious practice, they devoted to Roman Catholic Church, right? So they used the money they made from Columbian exchange to finance the war of religious conflicts back home in Europe that lead to their hyperinflation, and that kind of undermines Spain's authority and power and influence in Europe, right? So that opened the window of opportunity for other European states to rise up and started to colonize America as well. So that's the chain of logic, the domino effect in this time period, all right? And you have homework today. Consider that your holiday gift, okay? So your homework today is short answer question, all right? So short answer question today. You don't have to work on, when you take the exam, you are supposed to answer to both of it, all sub-question A, B, C. But since this is a practice, right? It's a practice. So you only need to choose one question to answer to, all right? And for short answer question, like if you choose A, provide one specific piece of evidence. So that would be your assertion, your thesis that demonstrate a new form of government. New form of government, this is period 1, all right? In the period from 1250 to 1450. Okay, what do we mean by a new form of government? We talk about all this state building, remember? And in this period 1, it's gonna be either Islamic Empire or American Aztec Inca or Chinese dynasty. So that's new, right? That's new, especially Islam. So and later on you can say Mongol as well, okay? Because Mongol rise in the early 11th century, right? So you can include that as well. So what kind of government they have? All right. So your evidence is gonna be based on your database of your knowledge of this AP world history. So that's your thesis, right? And then you're gonna explain why this new form of government fitting to the required is new. Why it is new? What is new? All right. So the new part is your evidence. The new part is your evidence. Yes. Can I hear you, Ryan? I really cannot hear you. You're kind of, breaking up. You can type, all right? So your evidence new, right? So this would be your, for example, you can say caliphate, right? Khanate, sultanate, right? Chinese dynasty, okay? Those are new form of a government. Why is new? Because Sui dynasty reunified China as well, right? And then you need a reasoning part. So your reasoning is gonna explain why this kind of government was not available before, and then it is available now. So you use your reasoning to link your evidence, whatever evidence you come up with, to circle back again to prove that your thesis is correct, right? So you see my evidence, it fitting to the question, right? It's new because it was not there before, right? So that's what all you need to do. Okay, you make a claim, and then you can say Islamic empire. That would be your evidence, all right? And your assertion and your evidence will be either caliphate or sultanate, right? And you explain why, because it was not there before, right? In Arabic world, it was a loosened city-states, but now it's unified, right? Under one centralized government. Does that make sense? So as long as you cover your assertion, your evidence, your reasoning to link your evidence back to your assertion, you're cool. Then you have the full mark for this very question. Okay. No. SAQ, they are stimulus-based question. That's question 1 and question 2. For question 3 and 4, it's knowledge-based. Remember, for short answer question, you are supposed to answer altogether 3 questions in this section. And question 1 and 2 are stimulus-based. Question 3 and 4, you choose 1 out of 2. Those questions are knowledge-based. All right. So today we practice knowledge-based short answer question. That makes sense to you, Ryan? All right. Okay, so that's it. Sorry to end the class a little bit late. All right, but have a nice holiday. Okay, if you have a question, that's the time to ask. Any questions? Any questions? Any questions? No? If not, thank you for coming. And you guys all have a happy holidays. I'll talk to you next time. Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Pleasure. Bye. Merry Christmas.
Thank you.